Hi all, let's talk liquid and powder, specifically mix ratio. One of the first things that's important with mix ratio is to know the anatomy of your brush. So here we have the handle, then the ferrule. The thicker part is the belly and the end part is the flags. If you look at that really closely, can you see that the very tip of the brush is a little darker than the rest of the brush? Kind of a more chocolate color. That is the flags of the brush, and that's mainly what we're going to work with to achieve our mix ratio and to work with the bead. It's important when you first take your brush out of the case that you completely submerge it in the liquid. And I want you to watch really closely. Can you see the air bubbles come out as I twist? You want to release all that trapped air out of your brush when you take it out before each client. That's going to help you consistently get a good mix ratio. Changing the sides of your bead is as easy as wiping on the dish more or less. So if I wipe from ferrule to flag on one side and ferrule to flag on the other side, I'm going to have less liquid in the brush. If I wipe ferrule to flag on one side and belly to flag on the other, I'm going to have a little more liquid. If I only wipe belly to flag, I'm going to have enough liquid to get a very large bead. The next thing is you see a lot of nail professionals tap their powders flat. The reason for that is it makes it a lot easier to come right into the powder, pull the brush forward, bring it out, and let the liquid get into the powder. When you set your beads down, you just need to place, and it should form a nice little dome without pancaking out and without staying really solid. To get into a little more detail, watch the brush really closely. When we go in the liquid, see the belly fatten up if we leave it in there for a couple seconds? Then we're going to wipe that out. I'm only going into my powder as deep as the flags. So I'm not sticking the whole thing down in the powder, I'm just going in up to the flags. I'm then giving the liquid 3 seconds to get to the powder. That way when I place it, it comes easily and neatly off the brush. There's not a lot of residue left on the brush, and it's going to make a nice little easy dome shape. If you're using the perfect color pink, the pure pink, and retention, when you have a good mix ratio, it will look kind of like frosted glass. If I bring this up really close, I don't want to accidentally bump it. Can you see how that kind of looks like frosted glass, but yet it's dripping? What do you think that means that bead is? If it's dripping, it's probably too wet. Now look at this one. After 3 seconds, it still has some powder, and if you look really close you can see the little speckles of powder on the bead still. If we were to try setting this really dry bead down, not only does it not want to come off our brush, if we get it off, it's going to stay pretty clumpy. You want to make sure if you ever have a bead that's not the right mix ratio that you really clean your brush out after picking it up so that you don't get any chunks in your brush. If a bead is too wet, you can go back in for more powder. If it's too dry, you want to scrap it. Can you see how that looks like frosted glass? Kind of like a mug that you've had in the freezer, and you pull it out. And it's getting a little drippy because I'm sitting here holding it for a really long time. It was good when we first pulled it out. Each manufacturer has a different mix ratio, so you want to find out how much liquid to powder you're using, or if they don't have a specific liquid in powder, if they just have a certain way that the bead should look when you work with it. When you use a solid color, for example white, it's going to change the appearance of the bead. So if I pick up a bead with the white, and we go in really close, not that close, see how it looks like an orange peel? It's pitted, but yet the surface is smooth and glossy. When you have that orange peel appearance, that is a good mix ratio. Let's pick up a really dry one. See how it kind of looks like powdered sugar sitting on the surface? And I see a lot of people do this. Tap, 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 tap. All that does is sprinkle powder everywhere. It doesn't adjust the mix ratio. When it's too dry, you definitely want to scrap it. Too wet is going to be really smooth. And when you place it on the nail, a lot of times a nail that is too wet will have kind of a marbled purple appearance. So if it looks like you've marbled some purple into your white, you may be working a little bit too wet. And see how that's smooth and glossy? It doesn't have the pitting that the bead had with the good mix ratio. So it's too smooth and glossy, which means it's too wet. Let's bring the pink back, and let's take a look at workability when we change our mix ratio. Let's pick up a good one, set it down, place it, give it a couple seconds, and it's going to start working itself. It's going to take a nice dome shape on its own. And since we want to work in a curve on the nail, this is doing a lot of the work for us when it's a good mix ratio. For the next example, let's do too wet. So if I set that down, it's going to begin to flatten really quickly. And let's say that I've placed that on a nail. It's most likely running towards the sides because the nail is going to curve down. Excuse me. So it's most likely running towards the lateral folds. So I'm going to be trying to chase it from each side, press it into place and chase it, chase it, chase it. And so I'm going to be doing more work with the bead that's too wet. If we pick up a bead that's too dry, first off, we're going to have some sprinkles on the nails. Then when we place that, it's kind of stubborn about coming off the brush. And as you can see, if we let it sit, it doesn't really dome out as easily and as evenly as that bead that was a good mix ratio. But if we come in and try to fix it, it's a little more stubborn. It's not as easy to work with as the bead would be that has a good mix ratio. So with too wet and too dry, we can make a decent looking nail. But what we're going to run into is we're creating more work for ourselves, as well as having surface breakdown, because if it's too wet, what can you run into? You can run into lifting and peeling and overexposure. How about too dry? It's very common for chipping and cracking. You're right. So working with a good mix ratio not only gives us easier application, it also gives you less filing and more product control. You're also going to be less likely to have surface breakdown with a good mix ratio combined with proper prep. I hope this helps with your mix ratio questions, and thanks for watching.